HP's Pavilion Aero was one of the laptops I actually used last year for a lot of my scripting work, and they finally updated it with an AMD Zen 5 chip. It continues to be a super light 13-inch laptop with a nice screen and a comfortable keyboard that's quite affordable. Since we value your time, the gist is that I was really excited to see an update to this laptop, but it didn't end up living up to what I was hoping for. Its battery life is pretty mid, and it often feels warm. Don't get me wrong, if you can get a great deal on one for around $600, its trade-offs are pretty fair. But it isn't a must-buy, and I definitely wouldn't recommend people buy it at its full MSRP, as you can get laptops with better battery life and less annoyances. I'll go through the pros and cons in this video, and they are also listed on our website, bestlaptop.deals. Let's dive in. I'll start with how the laptop looks and feels. In its ceramic white color, it's very appealing, but be aware it has white keycaps. It also has a white backlight, which can blend in with the characters and make them hard to see. Luckily, it also comes in silver with darker keycaps, if you prefer that. The whole chassis has this satin coating that feels nice and doesn't appear to pick up fingerprints at all. It is made of a magnesium and aluminum alloy, which helps it be the lightest in its class, but it does end up feeling a little cheap and plasticky. There is more screen flex and keyboard deck flex than you might get on a sturdier laptop like the Dell XPS 13, but that one is much more expensive. Compared to the XPS, the Aero is a little deeper, and compared to the more budget-friendly 13-inch Surface laptop, it is a little wider. So, this is not the smallest 13-inch laptop available, but it might be the cheapest and the lightest with a modern processor. We also wouldn't call it big by any means. It is still smaller than the 13.6-inch MacBook Air, and I found it extremely easy to throw in a smaller bag. The 13.3-inch display on the Aero is a high-resolution 2560 by 1600 IPS panel, which leads to small text looking very crisp. The colors aren't quite as accurate as you might see on an OLED, but it still covers most of the sRGB spectrum. This means it would be good enough for people who aren't doing professional color work. It is a matte panel that reaches over 500 nits of brightness. This is a good combination for using in a brighter environment, so you can minimize reflections. Overall, it is a nice screen for the price. But if you'd like to save $70, you could go for the 1920 by 1200 variant. It's supposed to have the same brightness and colors. Lower resolution displays also give you longer battery life, but be warned, the pixels per inch is going to be lower and text might start to look fuzzy for some folks. Neither of the screen options are touchscreens. Just like last year, I think the keyboard is a standout. It has a nice click and satisfying key presses that made writing this script feel super comfortable. My only con is that the keys wiggle the slightest amount, which you may notice when typing quickly, but it didn't stop the experience from being positive for me. As mentioned, the keyboard backlight is white, meaning that in a well-lit room, it's harder to read the white keys with the backlight on. If you turn it off, it's completely fine. In a darker room, which is when you'd want the backlight, I felt they were much easier to read. Turning it on and off like this might get a little annoying, but it is a pretty simple fix. We would really prefer manufacturers just stop doing this combo, though. The trackpad is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, of course, but the mechanical click felt clunky, like it was a little too deep and loud for such a small laptop. Tracking felt smooth enough, and it's too small to experience palm rejection, but overall, it was just fine. For ports on this laptop, they are pretty basic. On the left, we have a headphone mic combo jack and a 10 gigabit USB-A port. On the right, we have another 10 gigabit USB-A port, an HDMI 2.1 port, and two 10 gigabit USB-C ports. The inclusion of an HDMI port in a laptop this small is very nice to see, and is something it has over more expensive competitors like the MacBook Air and XPS 13. Something this laptop is lacking in the ports department is a USB-C on either side. This means you can only charge and dock the laptop from the right side, which proved particularly annoying for my desk setup where the dock is on the left. With the HDMI on the right too, that means all display-capable ports are on the right. Just a little annoying not to have an option on the left side. The speakers on this laptop are quite nice, actually. More bass than I expected, decent clarity, and good range. They could be a little louder, but in such a small chassis, that's not exactly surprising. Just note the speakers are downward-facing. If you use the laptop on a blanket where the sound can't bounce, you'll lose more volume and it may sound too soft. Here's how the 1440p webcam looks and sounds on the OmniBook 7 Aero. We feel that it does look pretty good, but this is in optimal lighting conditions. Here's how the 1440p webcam looks with overhead lighting, and it does feature IR for Windows Hello. Now, let's talk performance. Our unit comes with a Ryzen 7 350 processor and has the option for a Ryzen 5 340. We like these chips, as they perform better in CPU tasks than Intel's competing Lunar Lake. Among similar laptops, the Aero does well in Geekbench. It has a solid single-core score and lands near the top in multicore. It is only beat out by Intel's higher-tier Aero Lake H chip in the ZenBook 14 and the M4 chip in the MacBook Air 13. Switching over to Cinebench, which tests performance when the CPU is maxed out, we still see a pretty strong showing. Single-core is much better than the Zen 4 chip in last year's Aero, and multicore, as I said, is much stronger than the Lunar Lake chips in our OmniBook X Flip and XPS 13. You'll also notice we have the Ryzen 5 chip on our graphs in the OmniBook 16, so you can see how it performs here. If you don't need the extra multicore performance, we'd probably recommend that chip, as it is a cost savings and likely has better battery life. A big disappointment about this laptop is that it gets very warm in performance tasks, up to 46 on the keyboard deck during our Cinebench run. The MacBook Air also gets warm, but that makes a bit more sense as it doesn't have a fan to keep itself cool. Neither of these would be very comfortable on your lap if you were doing heavy CPU tasks. One of the reasons for this heat might be the fact that the Aero's fans are much quieter than many of these other laptops. This means they don't ramp up as much to cool the laptop. If you are more bothered by fan noise than heat, this might be a good solution for you. Another place where it got warm was when it was charging up from being dead. It charges very fast, and you can feel it get warm on the right side of the laptop where the USB-C ports are. Even during light use, I measured the keyboard deck on that side at 41. It wasn't too hot to touch, but it was a little distracting. In graphics tasks that utilize the integrated GPU, the Aero does very well, better than other laptops with the same chip, and even better than one of our Lunar Lake laptops. This means it would be good for some light gaming in your downtime. Next, let's talk battery life. It appears to be decent on this laptop, but not as good as we were hoping for. With the largest battery on this list and a relatively efficient processor, we were expecting it to last longer. Some of the reason for this might be that it has a higher resolution screen than some of these other laptops like the Yoga 714. Or it could just be worse at minimizing power draw during lighter use cases like video playback and office tasks. This would come down to an HP configuration more than anything else. Just an FYI, we no longer have our MacBook Air 13. That's why we included the Air 15. It lasts around the same. It has a larger screen to power, but a slightly bigger battery to compensate. Overall, at its current sale price of around $600 to $700, the Aero is almost perfect as an affordable, super portable 13-inch laptop. But I feel the CPU holds it back. It doesn't have the best battery life, and it gets a bit warm. I would have preferred it come with an Intel Lunar Lake CPU. If you don't mind its trade-offs and you're not doing much gaming, we would recommend the cheaper Ryzen 5 CPU, as we don't recommend this laptop for performance tasks anyways. If you can find a MacBook Air 13 around the price of the Aero, it is a much more premium-feeling laptop with less issues like getting warm while charging. It is also far more powerful. That being said, it isn't quite as compact and portable as this Aero, and some people may not want Mac. There are also some other OmniBooks from HP, like the OmniBook X Flip 14 and OmniBook 5 to consider. The X Flip gives you 2-in-1 capabilities, and the OmniBook 5 can be found a lot cheaper. Both these have different CPU options that would bring better battery life. However, they are a lot heavier. This is a good time to mention that we think everything being named an OmniBook now is kind of silly. OmniBook 7 is supposed to be higher tier than the OmniBook 5, but they have very similar products in both lines. So why does the Aero have to be an OmniBook? Also, what is the X for? It's confusing. Back on comparisons, if you're considering a higher-end config of the Aero, we'd recommend you look at the Yoga Slim 7i instead. If that laptop costs the same as the Aero, it is probably a better buy as it has a larger display, much better battery life, and it stays cooler to the touch. On our website, bestlaptop.deals, we list all the pros and cons of each laptop, and we have a lot more that you might be comparing to this one, so go check that out. It's going to be the best place to find a laptop this holiday buying season. We track deals right across retailers, and you can even set custom price drop notifications. Thanks for supporting the channel. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and until next time, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.